Beaten for being stupid, this K9 German Shepherd puppy couldn't even turn his head without shaking in shame. He was just a helpless K9 German Shepherd puppy, trembling in a dark corner. His little body was too afraid to move. Beaten down for simply not understanding commands. They called him stupid and useless. Every harsh word echoed louder than the last strike. His tiny frame shook as he cried silently, too ashamed to even lift his head. But what happens when a kind soul sees the broken spirit behind those sad eyes? Get ready for a story of unimaginable cruelty and even more powerful redemption. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories of hope, healing, and the incredible loyalty of K9 heroes. The rain came down hard that night in Houston, Texas, drenching the cracked sidewalks and overflowing the gutters. In the back alley, behind a worn-out training facility, a small, soaking wet K9 German Shepherd puppy huddled under a rusted dumpster. His fur was matted with mud and blood, his tiny ribs painfully visible under his thin coat. His name was Scout, or at least that's the name scribbled on the worn tag around his neck. But to the men at the training yard, he was nothing more than a stupid mutt, a waste of space. Every time Scout failed to understand their harsh commands, their anger was swift and cruel. He was too young to keep up with the older dogs. His small body was not yet ready for the harsh discipline they demanded, and for that, he paid the price. Struck for looking the wrong way, kicked for flinching when hands raised above him. Now curled into a trembling ball, Scout couldn't even lift his head. His ears flattened against his skull as thunder boomed overhead. Every sound made him flinch. He felt like he didn't deserve to move, didn't deserve to live. But through the storm, a faint sound reached his trembling ears. Footsteps, calm, steady, and purposeful. A man named Ethan Callahan had just finished a long shift at the local fire station. A decorated firefighter and a former K9 handler in the military, Ethan had seen his share of cruelty. But something about that stormy night pulled him toward that alley as if fate was guiding his every step. His boots splashed through puddles as he rounded the corner. And then he saw it. A pair of wide, terrified eyes shining in the dark, barely visible under the dumpster. "Hey there, buddy." Ethan crouched slowly, his voice soft and warm despite the pounding rain. Scout's body shook violently. He couldn't even turn his head toward the voice. All he could do was stare at the ground, his tiny body frozen in fear. Ethan's heart broke at the sight. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered, inching closer. Carefully, he extended his hand just far enough for Scout to see it. No sudden movements, no raised voices, just patience. Minutes passed. Scout's breathing was shallow, his sides quivering with every breath. Finally, with a small, uncertain whimper, his head turned ever so slightly toward the outstretched hand, his eyes, filled with unbearable sadness, locked onto Ethan's. "That's it, little guy. You're safe now," Ethan murmured, with all the courage his tiny heart could muster. Scout crawled forward, his movement stiff and painful. When his little nose finally touched Ethan's hand, it was as if a dam broke inside him. His weak cries turned into soft, heart-wrenching sobs, and his fragile body collapsed against Ethan's arm. Ethan scooped him up gently, wrapping his jacket around the shivering pup. Scout's body was ice cold, and he could feel every tremor as the puppy tucked his head under Ethan's chin, hiding his face like he was still ashamed to be seen. "You don't have to be ashamed, Scout," Ethan whispered against his damp fur. "You're not stupid. You're brave, and I'm going to prove that to you." As they walked away from that dark alley, the storm seemed to lighten. For the first time in his short, painful life, Scout felt something warm and real. Hope. But what neither of them knew was that the road ahead would be anything but easy. Scout's past had left deep scars, and some wounds aren't visible to the eye. The journey to healing had only just begun. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the wide windows of Ethan Callahan's modest home. The warmth filled the living room, painting everything in soft gold. Scout lay curled up on a thick folded blanket near the fireplace, his little body still shivering now and then, despite the comfort. His eyes remained fixed on the floor, and he hadn't made a sound since Ethan brought him home. Ethan sat across the room sipping his coffee, eyes never leaving the pup, He knew this wasn't going to be easy. Rescue wasn't a moment, it was a process. And sometimes the hardest part wasn't healing the body, but mending the soul. Hey, Scout. Ethan spoke gently, crouching down beside the puppy. He placed a shallow bowl of warm chicken broth near his nose. "You've got to eat something, little guy." Scout's ears twitched at the scent, but he didn't move. His head remained low, his eyes darting nervously toward the door, as if expecting someone to burst in and drag him back to that awful place. Ethan sighed softly. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you again. That's a promise." But promises meant little to a heart that had only known betrayal. Later that afternoon, Ethan brought out a soft leather collar and a small chew toy shaped like a fire hydrant. He placed them both beside Scout, then sat back and waited. Hours passed. Finally, as the sun began to set, Scout lifted his head slightly. His nose twitched at the unfamiliar scent of the toy. Cautiously, he stretched his front paw forward, barely touching the bright red rubber. His eyes flicked to Ethan, uncertain and full of doubt. Ethan smiled but didn't move. He knew better than to force it. This was Scout's moment to decide if the world was as dangerous as he remembered, or if maybe, just maybe, it could be something more. Slowly, with a trembling paw, Scout dragged the toy closer. He didn't play with it. He just held it between his paws, as if holding on to the possibility that life didn't have to hurt. The following day, Ethan decided it was time to introduce Scout to the world beyond the living room. He gently clipped the leash onto Scout's new collar. The moment the leash clicked, Scout dropped to the floor, his body flat against the hardwood, as if waiting for the worst. "It's okay, buddy. This isn't what you think it is," Ethan whispered, kneeling beside him. He sat there for nearly an hour, softly petting Scout's head until the tension in the puppy's body slowly melted away. Then, with the gentlest tug, he led Scout outside into the yard. The moment Scout's paws touched the grass, something shifted. His nose lifted the air, breathing in the fresh scent of earth, flowers, and freedom. His ears perked slightly, and for the first time, his tail gave the faintest, unsure wag. Ethan crouched nearby, careful not to crowd him. "Take your time, boy. You're doing great." Scout took a hesitant step forward, then another. His tail wagged again, this time a bit more confident. And then, in a moment Ethan would never forget, Scout lifted his head toward the sky, eyes wide with wonder, and let out a small, uncertain bark. It was the first sound of hope Ethan had heard from him. But healing wasn't a straight line. That night, as darkness fell over the house, Scout refused to sleep alone. When Ethan tried to leave him in the living room, the puppy whimpered softly, his tiny body trembling once again. Without hesitation, Ethan scooped him up and brought him to his own room, placing the pup gently at the foot of the bed. "It's all right, Scout. I'm right here," Ethan whispered as he turned off the lamp. And for the first time in days, Scout closed his tired eyes and drifted into sleep, the steady sound of Ethan's breathing guiding him into peaceful dreams. Little did either of them know, the biggest test of their bond was yet to come. The following week brought small victories and unexpected setbacks. Scout was beginning to trust, taking hesitant steps outside, sniffing at the grass, even allowing Ethan to brush his patchy fur. But deep inside, the scars from his past still held tight. One afternoon, Ethan decided it was time to take Scout beyond the safety of their backyard. A quiet walk through the neighborhood park. Nothing overwhelming, just a gentle reminder that the world wasn't all pain and punishment. The moment they reached the sidewalk, Scout's body tense, his tail tucked low, ears flattened, and his legs locked in place. "It's okay, Scout. Just a little walk," Ethan encouraged, crouching beside him. "Nobody's going to hurt you." But the leash, just a gentle tug of it, seemed to awaken old fears. Scout's eyes darted nervously, his breathing rapid, and his little frame started trembling. Ethan knelt in front of him. "Hey, look at me," he said softly, placing his hand gently under Scout's chin. "You're not that scared little puppy anymore. You're safe. You're strong." Scout whimpered but didn't bolt. Slowly, Ethan sat on the ground right there on the pavement, his presence calm and patient. He began to hum an old lullaby his mother used to sing when he was a child. The soft tune seemed to ease the tension. After several long minutes, Scout took one step forward, then another. They didn't make it far that day, barely to the end of the block. But every step Scout took was a battle one. The next day, something changed. Scout stood at the back door, staring out at the open yard. His tail gave a small, determined wag. When Ethan opened the door, Scout stepped out without hesitation, his head higher than before. But just as things seemed to be improving, the setback came. While on a short walk, a loud bang echoed from a nearby construction site, metal slamming against metal. The sound was sharp, aggressive, familiar in all the wrong ways. Scout froze, his body paralyzed by fear. His legs buckled, and he collapsed onto ground, covering his head with his paws as if bracing for the inevitable blow. Ethan's heart shattered at the sight. He knelt beside him, pulling the trembling puppy into his arms. "It's okay, Scout. It's okay. You're safe. I promise," he whispered over and over, rocking him gently like a frightened child. That night, Scout wouldn't let Ethan out of sight. Every time Ethan stood to leave the room, Scout cried softly, his eyes wide with terror. Ethan gave up trying to sleep apart from him. He grabbed a pillow and lay down on the floor next to Scout's blanket. In the dim light, Scout crawled closer inch by inch until his small head rested against Ethan's chest. His tiny body finally stopped shaking as Ethan's steady heartbeat lulled him into a restless sleep. The following morning, Ethan made a decision. "This isn't going to be your life anymore, buddy," he said as he gently scratched behind Scout's ear. "You're not broken. You're just waiting to become who you were always meant to be." Ethan contacted a trusted friend from his military days, a retired K-9 trainer named Sarah Jennings. She specialized in rehabilitating traumatized service dogs. If anyone could help Scout heal, it was her. Later that afternoon, they loaded Scout into the truck. Scout sat in the passenger seat, his tiny head peeking out from under the blanket, eyes filled with uncertainty, but also something new, curiosity. As they drove toward the rehabilitation center, Ethan glanced down at him. "We're going to help you find your strength, little warrior," he whispered. Scout's eyes met his, and for the first time, there wasn't just fear in them. There was a glimmer of trust. But neither of them knew the real test was yet to come, and it would push Scout further than he had ever gone before. The rehabilitation center sat on the outskirts of town, a peaceful property surrounded by wide-open fields and rolling hills. It was a place designed for healing, not just for dogs, but for the people who loved them. As soon as they arrived, Scout pressed himself against the floorboard of the truck, his ears flat and body trembling. Ethan reached over, gently placing his hand on Scout's back. "You're not going in there alone, buddy. I'm with you every step," he whispered. Sarah Jennings, the retired K-9 trainer, waited outside. She had a calm, commanding presence, the kind that animals instinctively trusted. Her silver hair was pulled back under a worn baseball cap, and her blue eyes softened when they landed on Scout. "Poor little guy's been through a war, hasn't he?" she said quietly as Ethan carried Scout in his arms. "Worse," Ethan replied, his jaw tight. "But he's a fighter." Sarah nodded. "Let's show him what peace feels like." The first few days were slow and careful. Sarah didn't rush Scout. She spent hours simply sitting near him, allowing him to adjust to her presence without pressure. When Scout shook uncontrollably or flinched at sudden noises, she calmly reassured him, never raising her voice or forcing contact. Ethan stayed close throughout the sessions, watching every small breakthrough with pride. On the third day, Scout took his first few steps toward Sarah without coaxing, his tail wagging ever so slightly. But the real challenge came during what Sarah called the trust test. In a large enclosed field, Sarah placed Scout in the center and asked Ethan to step to the far end. The idea was for Scout to cross the open space on his own, to choose trust over fear. At first, Scout stood frozen, his little paws planted firmly in the grass. His eyes darted between Sarah and Ethan, uncertainty clouding his expression. Ethan crouched low at the far end of the field, his voice calm and steady. "Come on, Scout. You can do this. I'm right here, buddy." Scout whimpered, his front paw lifting slightly off the ground before retreating. His heart pounded so loudly in his tiny chest that Ethan could almost feel it from across the field. "Take your time, Scout," Ethan called again, his voice filled with quiet encouragement. Scout's legs trembled as he stepped forward, then stopped. Step by step, he inched his way across the field, every muscle tense, every movement uncertain. And then halfway across, a loud crack echoed in the distance. A car backfiring from a nearby road. Scout immediately dropped to the ground, covering his head with his paws, his small body shaking violently. Ethan's heart clenched, but he didn't rush to him. He knew this was a moment Scout had to face for himself. From across the field, Ethan called softly, "It's okay, Scout. I'm here. Nothing's going to hurt you. Remember, you're not that scared little puppy anymore. You're stronger than this." For a long, painful moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Scout lifted his head. His eyes met Ethan's, and something flickered there. Something stronger than fear. With a determined little huff, Scout stood. His legs still wobbled, but he pressed on step after shaky step until he reached Ethan's arms. When he finally collapsed into Ethan's embrace, Ethan felt a tear roll down his cheek. "You did it, buddy," he whispered, holding the trembling puppy close. "You did it." That night, back at home, Scout didn't hide under the table or flinch at every sound. He curled up beside Ethan on the couch, his head resting on Ethan's leg, his breathing slow and steady. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Scout had crossed a bridge he thought he never could. And little did they know, fate had one more challenge waiting, one that would test everything they'd built and show the world just how brave Scout had become. The days that followed were different. Scout walked taller. His tail lifted higher, his eyes, once clouded by fear, now held a spark of life. Each morning, he would wait by the door with his leash in his mouth, ready for the walks he once dreaded. Ethan couldn't help but smile every time he saw it. It was the kind of progress that made every tough moment worth it. But just as things seemed to settle into a peaceful rhythm, an unexpected event shattered that calm. One sunny afternoon, Ethan received a call from his old fire station. They were short-staffed on a critical search and rescue mission after a child had gone missing in the woods near the outskirts of the city. Time was running out, and they needed every experienced hand on deck. Ethan's heart tightened. He hadn't participated in a mission since retiring, but this wasn't about him. It was about saving a life. He glanced down at Scout, who was lying calmly at his feet, chewing on his favorite toy. Could he handle this? Would the fear return if Scout faced something that reminded him of his traumatic past? Before he could overthink it, Scout stood up and walked over, sitting in front of Ethan with an expectant look, as if he knew exactly what was happening and wanted to help. "You really think you're ready for this, buddy?" Ethan whispered, kneeling to meet his eyes. Scout's tail gave a confident wag. An hour later, they arrived at the search site. The area was dense, the trees thick with undergrowth, and the sun was already beginning to dip behind the hills. Search teams were scattered throughout the forest, calling out the missing child's name. Ethan tightened his grip on Scout's leash. "Listen, Scout, this isn't training anymore. This is real. There's a little boy out there who needs us. You think you can help me find him?" Scout stood tall, his ears perked and alert. His body language had changed. He wasn't the broken, trembling pup Ethan had found under a dumpster. He was focused, ready, and determined. They moved into the forest, Ethan allowing Scout to take the lead. The pup's nose went to work immediately, sniffing along the trail. For a while, there was nothing but the crunch of leaves and the distant calls of the other searchers. Then, without warning, Scout froze. His ears shot forward and his body tensed. He let out a sharp, short bark and began pulling at the leash, leading Ethan toward a narrow path that wound deeper into the woods. "Easy, boy. Lead the way," Ethan encouraged, following closely behind. Scout's pace quickened, his snout low to the ground, tail high and wagging rapidly. Minutes passed as they navigated through the thorns and over fallen branches, and then they heard it, a faint, desperate sob. "Help, please." Ethan's heart raced. He pushed through the last line of bushes, and there, at the base of a small ravine, sat a young boy no older than 7. His clothes were torn, and his face was streaked with dirt and tears. Scout immediately descended the slope, carefully making his way to the boy. He licked the child's face gently, his body language calm and reassuring. The boy wrapped his small arms around Scout's neck and cried into his fur. Ethan quickly followed, crouching down beside them. Hey, kiddo, you're safe now. We've got you, he said softly. The boy looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. I was so scared. And then this dog. He found me. Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat as he watched Scout sit proudly by the boy's side, his head held high like he'd always belonged in that moment. That night, after the boy was safely reunited with his family, Ethan sat on the porch with Scout beside him. The air was cool, and the stars stretched endlessly overhead. Ethan reached down and stroked Scout's head. You were incredible today, Scout. You saved that boy's life. You saved mine, too, in more ways than you'll ever understand. Scout leaned into his touch, his tail thumping against the wooden porch. He wasn't broken anymore. He was a hero, and for the first time in his life, he knew it. The rescue mission had transformed something deep inside Scout. In the days that followed, his confidence bloomed like a flower breaking through concrete. He no longer hesitated at the door when it was time for a walk. He greeted strangers with a cautious but curious glance instead of shrinking away. And every evening, he sat proudly by Ethan's side, watching the sunset like a soldier standing guard. But the greatest moment of Scout's journey was still ahead. It started with a call from Sarah Jennings. She invited Ethan and Scout to a public demonstration event for rehabilitated working dogs, a chance to show the community the power of second chances. It wasn't a competition, but for Scout, it would be the biggest test of his recovery. Crowds, loud noises, an unfamiliar place, all the things that once reduced him to a trembling shadow. Ethan hung up the phone and looked at Scout, who was now lounging lazily on the couch, his head resting on Ethan's old fire station jacket. What do you think, buddy? Ready to show the world what you're made of? Scout lifted his head and gave a small, confident bark, as if to say, let's do this. The day of the event arrived with bright blue skies and a cool spring breeze. The town's main park was buzzing with activity. Stalls were set up, children ran across the grass, and a loudspeaker crackled to life with announcements. Ethan could feel the tension creeping into his chest. This was a lot, even for a seasoned adult, let alone a dog who had once hidden under dumpsters to escape the world. He knelt beside Scout near the entrance to the demonstration ring. Listen, Scout, this is just like the forest, okay? One step at a time. I'm right here, Ethan said softly, running his fingers through Scout's thickening coat. Scout took a deep breath, his nose lifting into the breeze. And then, with surprise and determination, he took the first step onto the field. The announcer introduced him to the crowd, his voice booming through the speakers. Scout flinched at first, his ears twitching back, but Ethan placed a steady hand on his back. You're safe. You've got this, he whispered. They walked through the obstacle course set up for the demonstration. Tires to step through, small hurdles to jump, even a section simulating a rescue situation. At every station, Scout paused just briefly, his instincts battling with his newfound courage. But each time he looked up at Ethan, his tail wagging cautiously, and pressed on. The final test was the hardest. A sudden burst of loud noises played to the speakers, recordings of thunderstorms and sirens. The sounds echoed across the field. Scout froze, his body stiff. For a moment, Ethan saw the fear flash through his eyes, the echoes of his past trying to drag him back into darkness. Scout, look at me, Ethan said, kneeling in front of him. That's not your life anymore. You're stronger than this, remember. Scout stared into Ethan's eyes. Slowly, the tension in his body melted away. With a small shake of his head, he took a step forward, then another, until he reached the end of the course. The crowd erupted in applause, but Scout didn't seem to care about the noise or the cheers. His eyes were locked on Ethan, and his tail wagged proudly as if he knew he had beaten the demons of his past. That night, as they returned home, Ethan sat on the porch with Scout curled up at his feet. You did it, Scout, Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You proved to the world and to yourself that no matter how broken the past tried to make you, you can still rise above it. Scout let out a long, contented sigh, his body relaxed and peaceful. And in that quiet moment under the starlit sky, Ethan realized something important. This journey wasn't just about saving Scout. It was about how Scout had saved him, too. Spring slowly turned to summer, and life settled into a beautiful rhythm for Ethan and Scout. The once fragile and broken pup was now a strong, confident young German shepherd. His coat had grown thick and shiny. His muscles were well developed from daily walks and playful training exercises. But more than that, his spirit was whole again. Every morning, Scout would sit at the window, waiting patiently for Ethan to finish his coffee. As soon as the leash came off the hook, Scout would run to the door with a burst of excitement, tail wagging like a flag in the wind. His confidence was contagious, and the small community that once pitied the trembling puppy now admired the heroic demeanor he had become. One afternoon, the mayor's office called. Scout had been officially nominated for the town's annual Hero of the Year award, a title usually reserved for human citizens. But this year, after the miraculous rescue of the lost boy and Scout's remarkable transformation, the town decided it was time to honor a four-legged hero. Ethan stood by the window holding the phone, his heart full of pride as he watched Scout nap peacefully in a sunbeam on the living room floor. "Looks like you're about to become famous, buddy," Ethan whispered with a smile. The ceremony was held in the town square. It seemed like everyone had shown up that day: families, children, veterans, even the local news station. A large banner hung above the stage, reading "Honoring Courage, Hero of the Year." Ethan adjusted the small metal hanging from Scout's collar before they took the stage. "Remember, this is your moment," he said quietly. "You've earned it." As they walked onto the platform, Scout carried himself like a true hero. His head was high, his gait strong, his eyes alert but calm. The same park where he once froze in fear was now filled with applause meant just for him. When the mayor handed Ethan the plaque and declared Scout the official Hero of the Year, the crowd erupted, but what happened next silenced everyone. Scout, sensing the weight of the moment, stood in front of the microphone and let out a loud, proud bark that echoed through the square. It wasn't a bark of fear or anxiety. It was a declaration. "I am not broken. I am brave." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he crouched beside him. "You did it, Scout. You really did it." That night, they sat together on the back porch, a soft summer breeze rolling across the yard. Scout lay with his head resting on Ethan's lap, the metal still around his neck. "You know," Ethan began, his voice low and reflective, "when I found you that night under the dumpster, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me." He took a deep breath and continued, his eyes focused on the horizon. "I was lost after I left the fire department. I didn't know who I was without that uniform, without the missions, without the purpose. And then you showed up, scared, broken, but still fighting. And you reminded me that life isn't about what we've lost. It's about what we're still willing to fight for." Scout looked up at him with his big, intelligent eyes and let out a quiet, contented sigh. From that day forward, Scout wasn't just a hero by title. He became a symbol in the community, a living reminder that no matter how dark the past, there's always hope for a brighter future. He visited schools with Ethan, teaching children about kindness and resilience. He sat beside veterans struggling with PTSD, his calming presence helping them open up in ways they hadn't in years. He even became a therapy dog at the local hospital, walking the sterile halls with quiet grace, bringing comfort to those who needed it most. And through it all, Ethan remained by his side, his rescuer, his friend, his family. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills and Scout grew tired from a long day at the hospital, Ethan looked down at him and smiled. "Thank you for choosing to live, Scout. Thank you for teaching me how to live again." Scout pressed his head against Ethan's chest, his eyes closing peacefully. In that quiet, perfect moment, nothing else mattered. Not the pain of the past, not the hardships they had faced. All that mattered was this: they had found each other, and together, they had turned pain into purpose, fear into courage, and a broken life into something beautiful.